lot happened over the weekend. We had a ton of NFL action, which I will talk to you about the depths of my despair being a Redskins fan and the disappointing nature in which that game ended itself. And got a lot of college football stuff to get into, something that may or may not affect the college football playoff and the Heisman race. Involves Oklahoma University quarterback Baker Mayfield. But before we do that, I want to talk about some of the high school football action that did happen over the weekend. If you listen to Sports Talk with Sam Jordan, the show that comes on before this show, because Sam Jordan is the starting pitcher, which I guess would make me the closer. This analogy is falling apart because we don't really have a bullpen guy. But the point is, Russell's our bullpen guy. There you go. He gives you the news during the breaks. So the high school action that happened, Sports Talk with Sam Jordan. Sam Jordan was mentioning earlier that we have a lot of Chattanooga area schools still involved. And I thought, well, that's kind of crazy when you consider that this has been a really great year for Chattanooga high school sports. When you have to consider the amount of quality that's in Nashville, the amount of quality that's around Memphis, the amount of quality that's around Knoxville, for there to be this high amount of Chattanooga area schools to still be in it, that's pretty impressive. And so through the weekend, in Division 2, Class 3A, McCallie actually lost their game, but they lost their game to Brentwood Academy, and they're a Nashville-based school. But everybody loses to Brentwood Academy, so just congratulate McCallie on their run, as they are one of the better Chattanooga area schools. In Division 2, Class 2A, Notre Dame won their game and advanced. In Class 3A, in Division 1 Class 3A, Red Bank advanced. In Class 2A, Tyner advances over Marion County, takes them to the woodshed, beats them 42-7. And in Class 1A, South Pittsburgh does it again, right? Just absolutely worked over Whitwell. And look, we thought that game was going to be a close game because you had two schools that are very familiar with each other, that play constantly. And rivalry games tend to be very close because they're very heated. And even if you're really, really good, your opponent knows you. They absolutely know you. So it's not an easy task. And you have a school that's undefeated in South Pittsburgh. You had a school that was, at the time, only a one-loss school in Whitwell. When the two schools faced each other during the regular season, South Pittsburgh really escaped Whitwell with a win. So you didn't think that this game was going to turn out to be a 33-7 game in favor of South Pittsburgh, except that's exactly what it was, because the Pirates have this defense that just smothers you. I mean, it covers you. I mean, there's no way of describing it other than it's blanket-like. They just show up, and throughout the playoffs, they haven't given up very many points. I believe this 7 points that they gave up to Whitwell is the most amount of points that they've given up in the postseason so far. Their first two opponents didn't score at all. I mean, South Pittsburgh is on another level at this particular juncture, and they are firing on all cylinders in a way that is highly entertaining to watch. It's pretty unbelievable. We're looking at a team that's, I mean, South Pittsburgh is not really a multi-dimensional team. Like, when you look at the numbers, they don't really throw the ball, right? I poked around and I was looking for some statistical South Pittsburgh numbers, and I wasn't able to find a whole lot of postseason numbers, but from the regular season, the Pirates don't throw the ball. They average 9 passing attempts a game. They're not trying to throw the ball. They're very content to let their defense stop you from ever seeing the end zone while they run the ball down your throat. And Garrett Rouston, their running back, they rode him to victory. He had 4 touchdowns in the game, man. He gets on that goal line. They're 5-10 yards out. Good night. It's over. It's over. And that's the lesson that we saw Whitwell learn repeatedly throughout that game, was you can't let South Pittsburgh get beyond the 20s. Like, if they move inside of the 20s, You're fine. Once they get in that red zone area, they're lethal. Absolutely cannot be allowed to get there, because once they get there, it's automatic points. I don't know if you've ever seen the Celebrity Jeopardy sketch on SNL, where all the SNL cast are pretending to be various celebrities who aren't very bright, and one of the categories that nobody ever chooses in the sketch is automatic points. Yeah, South Pittsburgh really likes automatic points. They get into the red zone, they just hand the ball off to Garrett Ralston, and it's over. That guy is scoring all day, every day. So South Pittsburgh advances in a lopsided game that we actually thought might have been pretty close. Who knew? You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose here on Nooga Radio, noogaradio.com, 92.7 FM. I'm going to jump to some of this college football action, though, because the SEC was an interesting place, right? You had LSU and Tennessee. LSU beats Tennessee 30-10. And I'm going to be honest with you. That score is a closer score than what that game should have been. And it's only because Danny Etling is not the kind of quarterback to really punish you for being bad that game was not more lopsided than it was. Because I'm talking Tennessee had mistake after mistake after mistake in that game. We had a couple of muffed punts. We had an offensive line that didn't seem capable of blocking anybody. There were just points where I was looking at it and going, wow, we just have 5 turnstiles standing there. Where is Garantano supposed to go? What was he supposed to do? Right? Like, as a freshman, let's be honest, you don't want those problems. You don't want to play an LSU defense that once they taste blood, once they understand that they can get at your quarterback anytime they want to, they get at your quarterback. They don't mess around. They don't play games. They just get after it. And Jarrett Garantano, I mean, there's got to be something that they can give that young man. Like, I don't know which side of the debate you fall on, whether or not college athletes should be paid, but he should be paid for that. Something. There's got to be some compensation for going out there and just getting whacked for 60 minutes. Something. Because that there is a tragedy. What happened to that kid? He was getting beat up all night. They couldn't run the ball. He had some good throws in the game. That's the thing. If you're Tennessee, there is talent at various positions where you can go, we might have some hope here. We might be having something to look forward to. You've just got to get the right guy in place at head coach, right? And understand that if you give that guy the head coaching position, you're going to have to give him some time. The cupboards are a little bare. Like, we're not working with very well-developed talent, right? Because like, Tennessee's done a great job of recruiting. This has been the issue with Butch Jones. He has been a talented recruiter, right? Like, he came in immediately and had a top 10 recruiting class. And then he had another one. And then on the bad year, was still top 15. Like, we weren't talking about a guy that couldn't get talent. But somewhere between acquiring the talent and developing the talent, something was not happening. There was not a disconnect there. And, of course, we always wait until you're fired for all the horrible stories about you to come out, right? Like, being fired as a college football head coach is the opposite of dying, right? When somebody dies, for whatever reason, we act like that person was great. Doesn't matter who they are. We act like that guy was a great guy. He was a nice guy. He helped old ladies across the street. Like, what are you talking about? He worked on Wall Street. No, he was a great dude. He was great. He never ripped anybody off. Are you sure about that? Absolutely. We just pretend like someone is a great person once they die. When you get fired as a college football coach, the opposite is true. We act like you were never good. Right? Like, it's easy now to act like nobody was ever excited that Butch Jones was here. Because he was such a good recruiter. When he first came here and got that first top 10 recruiting class, I remember how happy everybody was. I had a buddy that I would talk to every week, and I remember on National Signing Day, right? We just sat there on Rivals.com and 247.com and just hit the refresh button. And my friend was just telling me about how excited he was about Tennessee football and all the different places that this could go. Because we liked Butch Jones then. Now, all the stories now come out about, well, this was wrong with his tenure as head coach. For instance, one of the stories that I read today said that Butch Jones had a lack of institutional control, which may or may not be true. I'm not saying that all the negative stuff that comes out is false. I'm just saying it's funny how it only comes out after the guy's fired. Wouldn't this have been wonderful, pertinent information to know while he was still coaching so that somebody could say something? But no, it all comes out after he's fired. So one of the stories that came out alleges that the strength and conditioning coach last year that Tennessee fired during the offseason before they replaced him with Rock Gullickson, whose name sounds like he really ought to be a strength and conditioning coach. Because, your name's Rock Gullickson. What else could you do? If you're Rock Gullickson, you could be a bodybuilder. You could be a strength and conditioning coach. You could be a pro wrestler. That's 3 things. You could be a talk show host if you're Rock Gullickson. But even then, you're the guy that's talking about bringing the pain. So your team comes to you and says, look, we want a new strength and conditioning coach because we want a lot more freedom in what our workouts are going to be. And the story alleges that Butch Jones acquiesced to the players and fired a strength and conditioning coach. Now, I don't know how much validity to give to that story. It was on SEC Country, which does have a very good track record of reporting these things correctly. So there's that. But I will say this. You don't acquiesce to your players when they just tell you that they want stuff. Right? You listen to it, but you also have to use your discretion. You're the coach. Right? It's like when kids, when kids misbehave, and you know how it is, especially now around the holidays. You see a kid throwing a temper tantrum in the mall. It's one of the worst experiences you'll have of the year. Of the last 365 days that you have lived through, that'll be one of the worst ones. Some kid losing his mind in the mall. How did that kid get to be that kid? That kid got to be that kid because his parents didn't say no enough. That's how he got to be that kid. My parents said no and some other stuff. So yeah, there was never a dream of losing it in the mall. I can tell you that. And I'm not saying that Vols players are necessarily spoiled, but there is something to, we want to do the workouts that we want to do, so we need a new strength and conditioning coach. And the head coach goes, oh yeah, that's a great idea. That can't work. That can't work at all. The players know what they want. All kids know what they want. What do you want when you're 13 years old, let's say? What do you want? You want candy, you want cartoons, you want video games all day. You don't want to go to school. That's all you want. But you don't know what you need, right? Because we can talk about how the players are men now, but they're still very young men. And we'll talk a little bit about Baker Mayfield here in a second, too, because this kind of wraps into it. Young men aren't smart. How do I know this? I was 20 once. I was 21 once. Wasn't very bright. And it wasn't for any particular reason other than I was a 20-something-year-old guy. In your early 20s and you're a guy, you're an idiot. Just embrace this as a fact and try and learn things. You're not smart if you're a 21, 22-year-old guy. If you're 18, 19 years old, like you're just not. The coach of a football team cannot be listening to 18, 19, 20-year-old guy. What on earth do you know at that point? Like nothing. Absolutely nothing. You know what you want. You have no idea what you need, which is exactly why there's a head coach in the first place. Right? Like that's the problem. So yeah, if this story is true that the players came to Butch Jones and wanted a new strength and conditioning coach because they wanted the workout that they wanted to do, and Butch went, "Oh, okay, that's a problem." That's a very big problem, and it doesn't help in that player development part of the thing. Which you had a lot of players graduate last year, and that was something that Butch was very, very proud of. Was that he graduated a lot of guys, and that is something to be proud of. But when you graduate guys, you've got to replace them with somebody. And I praise Dan Mullen ad nauseum on the show because I think that Dan does a very good job of going, I don't get the best recruits, but I develop my players. Because Dan Mullen's gotten a lot of guys into the NFL. Right? And when you look at their rankings coming out of high school, it's a miracle that most of them are there. That's good player development. Well, Tennessee's been drawing from more talented high schools, getting more talented players. Why is it that when you graduate a group of guys, the players who replace them aren't ready to go? Why is it that you lose Josh Dobbs at the quarterback position and the next man up is not ready? Right? Whether it was Garantano or Dormady. You didn't have a succession plan in place for that. It was like, well, he's a senior. You knew he was graduating, right? It's things like that when you look at Tennessee football, you go, well, this stuff was a problem all along. And when you try and find the next head coach, that's something that you're going to have to look for, right? Whether that's Brady Hoke or whomever else. That's something that you're going to have to look for is you need the guy that's in control of the locker room, right? And it doesn't matter if the guy's a little wild, right? Like Jim Harbaugh's crazy. I'm 100% certain that Jim Harbaugh is out of his gourd. Crazy. Because who else tries to give a pair of shoes to the Pope when they see the Pope? That was your first instinct. That here's a deeply popular religious figure on this planet. I'm going to meet him and give him a pair of Nikes. That was his first thought. He tried to throw a football in an ancient Italian museum. I'd like just he's crazy, but he's got control of that locker room, right? Like that's not one of the things that you're going to ever come up and say, well, he's lost control of the locker room in that way. No, he has not. Your next guy is going to have to take control of this locker room because you can't have players doing whatever they want, right? And also, a lot of people jumped on Jalen Hurd, the former Tennessee running back who transferred out. A lot of people jumped on him for transferring out in the middle of last season because he felt like the coaching staff lied to him. He wanted to be in one kind of system. He said he was promised that they promised him they were going to have him in one kind of system, and then they didn't do it. They reneged on their promise, and he transferred out. And I remember Tennessee fans were hard on Jalen Hurd and calling him a quitter and all of these things and saying he was classless. But then you hear about all the trust concerns with this coaching staff. And are we sure we're going to be that hard on Jalen Hurd? Like, what if he had a point? What if he wasn't wrong? Clutch with Keon Rose on Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com, 92.7 FM. Another very interesting thing, though, from the weekend in college football, in the SEC specifically, Georgia. Georgia played Kentucky, And Kentucky's good, right? Not great. Great. We're not talking about a great football team. We're talking about a good, solid football team. Kentucky's good. And, hey, man, Georgia walked through Kentucky. First off, playing Kentucky after playing Auburn is a relief. Must be an absolute relief. I was looking at Jake Fromm stand tall in the pocket for once. He was throwing the football with a level of confidence I haven't seen him throw the football with all season long. Haven't seen him with that level of confidence. He knew exactly where he wanted to go with the ball at all times. Every single time. We're like, yeah, it's a vacation. Kentucky is a vacation compared to Auburn. Auburn was beating him up from the moment the first whistle was blown. If that game were happening, like, if that game didn't have an end, they'd still be beating him up to this day. They beat him up bad. Jake Fromm never looked so relieved to see an SEC East defense. Because the defenses in the East are like, okay, outside of Georgia itself, like, who has a good defense in the East? Florida a little bit when they've got all their players and they're not all suspended. Who else? There's nobody in the East with a good defense. Like, Jake Fromm must have been thrilled to go back to playing an East defense. He looked like it. He was throwing strikes all over the field. Right? Like, that's an opponent where Georgia could at least go, you know what? We know we can run the ball all over them, and they ran the ball very well too, but they did more throwing than I thought. And you know why? Because they've got to get Jake Fromm ready for Alabama. Like, if Georgia wants a chance to be in this playoff, they've got to beat Bama. I mean, they've got to beat Georgia Tech next week, but they've got to beat Bama in the title game afterwards. And he's the next dimension, because other than that, Georgia is one-dimensional otherwise. They just run. And it's great. Like, and I understand why you would run. If you had Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, all you do is run too. The problem is Auburn exposed that one-dimensionality. And Alabama is worse. Alabama is tougher, I should say. That's a harder team to run the ball on than Auburn. And it wasn't like they were really successful running the ball on Auburn. Like, that's the crazy thing. They weren't all that successful running the ball on Auburn, and running on Alabama is going to be more difficult. They're going to need to go to the air. I'm trying to prepare Jake Fromm for that. Clutch with Keon Rose on 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. We're going to talk Florida Gators and get you ready for some of these Thanksgiving matchups. Also, Baker Mayfield may have affected a lot of things. Next.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM. 3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4, 92.7 FM's news now.
A fire broke out at Spring Creek Elementary in the boiler room early this morning. The 911 call came in at 3:19 in the morning. School's out for the entire day. The fire was put out quickly by responders who are now working on a damage estimate. 3 people were shot early Saturday morning in Chattanooga. 1 was killed. Mr. Ladarius Cross, who was the driver of the vehicle that was riddled with bullets. Police say he was dead at the wheel when they got there. 2 victims were also on scene. 1, a juvenile, taken to the hospital. The other, Mr. Terrence Carruthers, suffering from minor injuries. He was also taken to the hospital. The Violent Crimes Bureau is investigating, trying to track down the gunman. And John Eaton, that CSAS second-grade teacher who went missing 2 weeks ago, has been arrested in Red Bank, accused of DUI charges. He gave his address as being in Saudi Daisy, different from the one his wife gave back when he went missing. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News Talk 92.7.
Partly cloudy out there through your nighttime hours. Not as cold. Overnight lows into the mid and upper 30s. Now for your Tuesday, a few passing clouds, still looking dry. High 60 to 62. More sunshine, dry and chilly weather returns Wednesday and Thanksgiving Day. High staying into the 50s. Experience the magic of the holidays with Rock City's Enchanted Garden of Lights. Create your one-of-a-kind adventure with dazzling views and almost a million colorful lights. Visit CRockCity.com for all of the magical details. And I'm Sourcine 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Ward.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.
Hi, this is Sonia with the Mountain Oaks Weddings, Events, and Tea Room in Ooltewah, located in the former James County Courthouse. Go back in style when you're planning your next event. Mountain Oaks is a full-service wedding venue and catering facility. No fuss, no mess, no cleanup when you schedule your next special event with Mountain Oaks. Leave the planning and the work to the experts, but take all the credit for your wonderful event. Call me, Sonia, at Mountain Oaks today at 423-238-9333 and leave the work to us.
423-238-9333 or stop by our location on Church Street in Ooltewah.
Pulse Centers of Chattanooga offers non-medical solutions to your body's problems using a state-of-the-art technology called pulsed electromagnetic fields, PEMF for short. We help fuel the body's natural healing response. If you're tired of taking harmful, addictive drugs that only dull your pain and cause awful side effects, the knowledgeable, friendly staff at Pulse Centers can help you end that cycle.
Call to schedule a free whole body assessment at 423-771-7755. That's 423-771-7755. An automated nuclear missile defense system has suddenly entered into launch mode, and you are the only one who can stop it. Escape Experience Chattanooga. Your team has just been infected with a deadly virus. Your only hope? There, in an abandoned farmhouse. Escape Experience Chattanooga. Handcuffed in a maximum security prison, you have an hour to flee. Escape Experience Chattanooga. These escape scenarios and more at Chattanooga's best escape room game and team building platform. Call now. Slots are limited. Register online at escapeexperience.com/Chattanooga. Escape Experience Chattanooga.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.
You're listening to Nooga Radio and NoogaRadio.com. Clutch with Keon Rose. Boy. Clutch with Keon Rose here on 92.7 FM. The word clutch got caught in my throat. So here's the thing. Florida has been feeling pretty good about themselves lately. Not for anything that they're doing in actually playing football, because there's no reason to feel good about any of that. But when you start looking forward to next year, you go, well, we're still very talented. We just need a guy who can coach offense. And Chip Kelly's available. That's amazing, right? Like, that's exactly what you want. In the year of your biggest need, one of the best offensive coaches that could be on the market is very much on the market, right? You're Florida. You're, at the time, right, the best program available. That's you. Florida, traditionally great college football power. And you look around at all the other traditionally great college football powers, and even the ones that are struggling a little bit, and it seems like they've got their guy at head coach. Right? Like, maybe not Tennessee, but you fired your coach first, so you got the jump on Tennessee. But everybody else, it looks like they've got their guy, more or less. So there's that. The problem is, if you're the Gators, you might not win that Chip Kelly sweepstakes. I have bad news for you. UCLA, they fired Jim Mora and reached out to Chip Kelly. And the rumor that's going around is that Chip Kelly likes them better, which makes perfect sense, right? It's UCLA, so you know that you're going to be in a place with wonderful weather, right? Florida has wonderful weather in places. I wouldn't say that Gainesville is one of those places. Been to Gainesville. It's not bad, but it's not LA. Also, Chip Kelly, very familiar with being out in California. That's the last place he coached. Also, the Pac-12. Chip Kelly's very familiar with the ins and the outs of the Pac-12. Areas in which he used to recruit. That's where that would be, right? Because, I mean, he was coaching in Oregon, and you know, you can be nice in Oregon, but let's be honest, most of his talent wasn't coming from Oregon. It was coming from California. And so, yeah, the places where Chip Kelly already knows how to recruit, that's also out there too. So if you're the Gators and you thought winning the Chip Kelly sweepstakes, you just had Chip Kelly in the bag. Well, now you don't, because you have competition. You have UCLA. They want to be good again. right? Because they have a guy who was a Heisman Trophy candidate at quarterback, and they've looked dreadful all season. Jim Mora out of excuses at this point in that program. And if you had to choose between Florida and UCLA, I think that's a tough choice. And if you're just going, where's a nice place to move my family and my kids? You might choose UCLA. Maybe. Right? Now, if you want to go to a place where they will spare they will spare every expense to give you the football team you want and need, you go to Florida. Okay? I think the Gators are more likely and more open to the idea of, hey, if we're going to sign big name Chip Kelly, we're going to go out there and get that guy everything he needs to be successful. All of it. And we're not going to hold anything back. I think if you really, really want to win and win as soon as humanly possible, go to Florida. Now, with all that comes with a level of pressure that is unnecessary, right? Because it used to be in the SEC, everybody was trying to catch Nick Saban, which brought a level of pressure that was already stupid to begin with. But now, if you're in the East, right? Like, forget Nick Saban for a half second. We can't let Georgia run away with the thing. We can't put ourselves in a position where we're going to be chasing Kirby Smart in Georgia for the next half decade. That's not about to happen. Which means if you show up in Florida and you're the head coach of the Gators and you struggle, especially if you struggle early, the patience on that's not going to last as long as if you go to UCLA, where, I mean, the expectation at UCLA is not necessarily that you're the best team anyway, right? Like, UCLA has high standards. But let's be honest, again, USC is the school that's got more pressure than you if you're UCLA. As of late, Stanford is a school that's got more pressure than you. They're more likely to win the Pac-12 than UCLA. So if you want to show up into a situation where you don't have a ton of pressure, a decent amount of pressure, but not a ton, you're familiar with the area, you know how to work it, and it's just kind of pleasant to be there, you go to UCLA. Now, if you want all of the resources to get out on the ground, and the moment your feet hit pay dirt, just immediately have all the resources you need, you go to Florida. But it's not a shoo-in that Florida gets Chip Kelly at all. Not guaranteed. It absolutely isn't. Clutch with Keon Rose on 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. So Baker Mayfield, Oklahoma and Baker Mayfield played the University of Kansas yesterday. And Baker Mayfield had some choice words for the Kansas bench. Not repeatable on the air. The FCC doesn't want me to do that. So I'm not going to repeat what Baker Mayfield said. But there was some explicit phrases and some crotch grabbing involved as he taunted the Kansas bench. And Oklahoma coach Lincoln Riley suspending Baker Mayfield next week for a pretty important game for the Sooners. They're playing the West Virginia Mountaineers, and you're going to need to bring your quarterback to that game because West Virginia likes shootouts. They like to put the ball up in the air, and they score often. You're going to want to bring your best quarterback. You're going to want to bring QB1 to that game. And, yeah, Oklahoma basically saying for disciplinary reasons, not bringing QB1 to the game. And, look, I understand why Lincoln Riley is doing this, right? He's actually putting discipline and actually putting what's best for the locker room and what's best in terms of teaching the players ahead of what's best for him in terms of winning. Which, first off, that is the sign of a man who knows his job is safe, right? To be able to have that level of moral fortitude, the only way you can do this in college football is if you just don't care or if you know your job is safe. The other thing, too, is that Lincoln Riley's pretty young for a football coach, and he's not jaded yet by what all of this can be. Lincoln Riley is suspending Baker Mayfield for the next game, last game of the season. Oklahoma is trying to get into the college football playoff. If they lose against West Virginia, they're probably not in. It's an important game. Baker Mayfield is your best player suspended. And I applaud Lincoln Riley for that. Like, I do applaud him for actually going out there and punishing. Because you remember when Johnny Manziel was at Texas A&M and Kevin Sumlin suspended Johnny Manziel for one half of a football game? Do you remember that? And how absolutely bogus a punishment that is, because what does that actually do? But Kevin Sumlin knew then what every coach already knows. There are just some games I can't afford to lose. And if I suspend Johnny Manziel, when people look back at the wins and losses of the season, they're just going to see a loss there. They're not going to see that I had to suspend my best player for that. They're just going to see an L. And you're not interested in having those issues and having those problems. So if I suspend him for a half, then it says that, well, I can suspend you. And it sends that message. But also, I have a chance at winning this football game. But really what it ends up doing is you undermine yourself. You neither punish the guy enough, nor do you have him for the entire game. I think Texas A&M did wind up winning that game, though. But the issue is, it was a half punishment. Lincoln Riley is giving a full punishment here for something that is not okay, right? That you're trying to teach sportsmanship. So this affects the college football playoff in a number of ways. And just looking at Lincoln Riley in the press conference, that he actually had to stop. He got emotional for a little bit. It's affecting him too. And another thing that this affects is the Heisman Trophy race, of which Baker Mayfield is still very much a candidate. And if you really want to be honest, Baker Mayfield is one of those guys that could actually win it. If you decided to yourself, this is a reason for Baker Mayfield to not win the Heisman Trophy, stop it. Stop it. Get off of your moral high horse on that one. Like, first off, the Heisman Trophy Award has never been a nice guy award. Baker Mayfield doesn't have to be a nice guy to win the Heisman. He just needs to be the most outstanding player in college football, which he does look like very often. We've had a lot of people in ambiguous moral situations, right? Remember Cam Newton? Cam Newton's dad allegedly accepting money for Cam Newton to play at Auburn, which, you know, is cheating if anyone could ever prove it, but nobody could ever prove it. And Cam went out there and played like the most outstanding player in college football, and you had to give him the Heisman Award, even though you had all of these questions circling around him. You still had to give him the award. And here's an interesting idea. I don't think they should ever have taken the award back from Reggie Bush. When Reggie Bush won his Heisman Trophy Award, he was the most outstanding football player in college football. They took the award back because he received money for playing at USC. Like he wouldn't have been as great if he didn't play there. Like, that's crazy. So we already walked the line of, should the Heisman Trophy winner be someone of moral standing? And Baker Mayfield has had his problems, right? Like, this is the second apology Baker Mayfield is making this season. The first apology, which is when Oklahoma beat Ohio State, Baker Mayfield grabbed a flag, an Oklahoma flag, and planted it right in the middle of the field. Now, for me personally, I don't know what he had to apologize for there. If Ohio State didn't want an Oklahoma flag planted literally in the middle of their field, maybe they shouldn't have let one get planted metaphorically on the field as they were just getting their behinds handed back to them for the greater part of that football game. Maybe. Right? I don't think that we should get mad at a guy for being fiery. Right? He's passionate about the game. And as I've mentioned before, he's like 20. He's 20, 21 years old. He's not smart. And he's not smart because none of us were at that age, right? Baker Mayfield has also gotten in trouble with the law a little bit, right? Which is that he got arrested for public intoxication. Now, I understand that that counts as an arrest. But that's like not a bad crime, right? Like of all the things you could be arrested for, public intoxication, it's not good, right? I'm not condoning it. It's not good, but he didn't get behind the wheel of a car and try and drive somewhere. He got arrested for being something that a lot of college-aged men are, which is drunk. Right? Like, I'm not condoning it, but what are we doing at that point? Like, you can try and paint this picture of Baker Mayfield being a bad guy, but I don't see a bad guy. I see a guy who makes mistakes of short-sightedness. He makes mistakes where he's not thinking, right? You drink a lot and then walk around in public. Well, because obviously you're not thinking. You take your flag and you plant it in the middle of the opponent's field, which I think is not only something that you would do if you were not thinking, I also just think it's particularly cool that he did it. And now he's saying all of this stuff to the opposing team bench because he's not thinking ahead. All of these things are things that you learn in life. Like, you learn to think ahead, right? And I think he's being punished for what he's done. He's being punished for saying the stuff that he said and for being unsportsmanlike and for representing his family and his university incorrectly. Like, he's being punished for all of this stuff already. So, like, what else do you want from him? But even if all of those things did make him a bad person, and I contend that they absolutely do not, the Heisman Trophy Award is not, nor has it ever been, a nice guy award. Like, that's not what it's about. Has Baker Mayfield been one of the best college football players this year? Absolutely. I believe he had one game, maybe 1.5 games where he didn't look like the best. He didn't look like the best. But overwhelmingly, he's been better than most of the other quarterbacks. I mean, Baker Mayfield has been head and shoulders better to me than Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen. Right? I think we're sleeping on Lamar Jackson, though. I think Lamar Jackson actually is having a better season than last year. And we're just not paying attention because he was so unimpressive at the end of last season. And Louisville is so consistent as a football team that I think we're punishing Lamar Jackson a little bit much for that. But honestly, his name should be mentioned in there with the Lamar Jacksons and the Saquon Barkleys, and we shouldn't even consider all of his antics, because his antics are not antics of someone who's malicious, right? Like Joe Mixon, who was the Oklahoma running back last year, who's now a Cincinnati Bengal. Joe Mixon punched a woman in the face. Like, that's bad. If you want to hold that against him, and I still wouldn't do it for the Heisman, right? Because the Heisman's not about morality. But if you want to hold it against him, I understand that. I do. Because you never put your hands on a woman. But Baker Mayfield, he swore a lot. He was drunk in public once. And he made fun of the other team that he beat. I mean, what are we doing with this? He's not a bad guy. Like, that's not a bad kid. We got to stop it with that. Clutch with Keon Rose on 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. So we had some interesting games in the NFL on Sunday, right? And we've got Atlanta and Seattle tonight, which I like that game a lot. So I'll try and check in on that because Atlanta and Seattle are starting to develop some kind of bad blood. If you recall, last season, in the regular season, Atlanta was about to win the game, right? Pass interference, possibly on Richard Sherman, that was not called against Richard Sherman on Julio Jones, and it cost Atlanta a chance to win that game last season. Then Atlanta gets the rematch in the playoffs, NFC title game, and just pounds Seattle into powder. And then Atlanta, now they're struggling a little bit this season, right? Like it feels like more recently they're getting their footing, but they started off slow. Like the Super Bowl is still haunting them a lot. And Seattle, they're not their best either, right? Richard Sherman is out for the year. They're not at their best either. And I'm looking at these two teams and going, well, yeah, both of them have a chance to still very much make the playoffs. And whoever gets to be the team to pull it together is probably going to banish the other to not actually winning this postseason, like getting into this postseason. This is an important game for two teams that don't like each other. There's some bad blood there. I wish Richard Sherman were playing in this game, though, because then that would add to the intensity. But this is an actually good Monday Night Football matchup. It is. So I'm excited about that one. But we had some interesting action in the NFL yesterday, right? You had Baltimore just blanking Green Bay because Brett Hundley is a rookie quarterback, and he's not a special rookie quarterback. He's an average rookie quarterback, and he looked like an average rookie quarterback. Baltimore continues to stay alive. Jacksonville beats Cleveland. Who knew? The Jaguars in control of the AFC South for no explicable reason. They're just in control. That defense is serious and legitimate. Tampa Bay beat Miami in a battle of two quarterbacks that are just Also, Tampa Bay featuring Ryan Fitzpatrick. Ryan Fitzpatrick is still in the league. How is Ryan Fitzpatrick still in the league? Like every year you find Ryan Fitzpatrick and he just sort of turns up on a new team. How is that dude still playing football? Like, I feel like when you've gotten to the point where you have accurately vetted that a guy isn't great, he shouldn't still be in the league. Every year we come to the conclusion that Ryan Fitzpatrick is an okay football player that's never going to be good or great. Dude's still in the league, starting in places. Right? Filling in for Jameis Winston, who's dealing with some off-the-field troubles. And I whiffed on that one last week. There's a whole story and a half there with Jameis Winston and an alleged sexual assault on an Uber driver. We might get into that one tomorrow. But Ryan Fitzpatrick still playing football, and I don't understand how that happened. The Giants get their second win of the season over the Chiefs of all people. And this is confusing to me because the Chiefs look like a good football team most of the time until that moment where they don't. And then they don't just look like a bad football team. They look like some other thing that you don't recognize at all. Just unbelievable. And of course, the tale of woe. I live my life as a Redskins fan, which means that I live my life in a sea of sadness. I live my life in a sea of misery. And yesterday was the pinnacle of that misery, right? The Redskins play the Saints. 2 minutes left to go in the football game, 15-point lead. And I'm not lying to you. I looked at the score of that game, and I went, ugh. And that's not how you're supposed to feel when your team has a 15-point lead with 2 minutes left to go in the game. But I looked at the score, and I went, ugh. Because I know this football team. I know it. And they blew a 15-point lead. Drew Brees went 11 for 11 passing in the last 2 minutes of the game. Could not stop that man. Couldn't keep him out of the end zone. Now, yes, were there referee shenanigans? Yeah, the referees made a bad call, called an intentional grounding on Kirk Cousins that they admitted today was, in fact, not an intentional grounding. But you know what? The Redskins made enough mistakes to bury themselves. They didn't even need the referees' help there. They didn't even need it. They buried themselves, right? Anytime you need the referees to save you from a 15-point collapse, that's you. That's not them. So, yeah, didn't have a good time yesterday watching football. Clutch with Keon Rose on 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. Remember, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Stay clutch. Falcons, Seahawks, tonight. Alex Jones, next.
95.3 HD4, 92.7 FM.